Good afternoon. This is one of our continuing Anything app get-togethers. Happy to have you all here. What we're going to talk about today are the three
You want to record,
topics.
right? You want to record, Marty?
I am recording.
Oh, good. There we go. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the first thing we'll discuss is analysis judging of the ARV sessions that we're all involved in here. The feedback, and then hopefully Alexis will join us. He put out on our general discussion list that he is offering a scholarship. Hopefully he'll show up and give us more details than I'm aware of, but if not, I'll at least share what I know, and we'll pick it up. He has his mother's in the hospital, so he wasn't sure he'd be able to join us. Now, in terms of analysis and judging and feedback, notice we're not talking about the remote viewing phase here. And in my opinion, the remote viewing, once you sort of get the idea that it's largely a matter of setting proper intention and letting the information come in and writing down what you get to generate the transcript that's going to be analyzed and judged. The remote viewing session in many ways is simpler, kind of in quotes, but simpler than the analysis judging and the feedback session. So we're going to go through these other two because it's only when all three are merged together smoothly that we can approach what I think are the optimum hit rates that each of us and each of you, want. Now, the approach here, and I'm going to go over it in this way, is you have one transcript. It's associated with one coordinate, one transcript reference number. Different people call it different things, but there's a tag of some sort associated with the whole prediction cycle with one RV transcript. And that has associated with it one photo site. And you do your analysis judging on that, and then you repeat starting over and done independently. That's one of the key things, which it turns out is one of the challenges, because you just, it's difficult to remember, to forget what you've just done, and yet that is part of this process. You just sort of wipe your memory bank clean, and then you go on to the next one. So I want us to do, and I mean us, I'm going to have you actually do one here. And here's an example transcript. It happens to be mine, but the only reason the name of the person is relevant is often judges will be working with the same person over and over, and they do then get somewhat familiar with their style. And so that sometimes is helpful, and that's fine. The idea here is to do the judging as best as is possible, as is defined largely by the viewer at feedback time will get an opportunity to look and see how the judging went, and if everybody agrees we're doing it right, generally people will roughly agree, and there'll be differences, and all that should be discussed. This interaction between the remote viewer and the judge, I believe, actually is quite important, because there will be things which will sometimes be missed or misinterpreted, and all of this is part of the process. But this is a typical transcript that I supplies when I do my remote viewing. Tends to be um, relatively short, and some judges think too short, but sometimes I try to do a little bit more. But right now doing I'm doing self-judging, so I judge these myself. I happen to be a believer in self-judging as being as good as independent judging. Um, so if you look here, you see things like jumble, life forms, motion, falling, water or clouds. And when I put things on the right, that means it's like an analytical overlay. I feel it sort of came in from the intellectual side as opposed to from my subconscious. I always use ideograms, and this was a very strange one, but it definitely led to this feeling of jumbled. And here's where I got from this ideogram, life forms, emotion. And then I often just put a rectangle and sort of try to fill up what I think might be the geometry and stuff in the photo. But I am very clear, and I hope you're clear, that even though I may use the word photo, it's definitely a photo site where the photo is a transfer to the location at the time the photo was taken, and the idea is to pick up information which can be verified from the photo. So after doing this one, I was given as feedback this photo site. So as a judge, and we're looking at this as a judge now, it turned out this was independently judged, but during my feedback session, which we're going to get to, I essentially, as part of my feedback session, I do judging. I want to see how well I did compared to my transcript and the actual feedback photo. So I spend a lot of time with my feedback photo and transcript together, which is exactly the same thing you do when you're a judge. So just quickly looking at these two together, which is what you do, of course, as a judge. As a judge, you will have generally two photos, but you judge them one at a time. In this case, this is the only photo I saw, and this is the transcript. And so I want us right now to take the point of view of, okay, what is this judging thing? How do we judge a transcript versus a photo? And try to make sense of this and use it as part of the ARV process. Well, they're really, I don't know, sort of three categories, at least I would categorize them as from highly subjective, where in fact here there's sort of three levels: low correspondence, medium correspondence, high correspondence. I can say the most subjective, sometimes somebody will say, this is good, this is fair. They might just categorize it like that and then go on to the other one rather quickly. Here, there's at least a ranking system where you would look and say, okay, yeah, I see life forms, I see motion. Do you think there's falling? There is water. It was an AOL. What do you think about the geometry here? And then you would come and, I don't know, why don't you tell me? What do you think? What do you think at this level Would you give this a 1, 2, 3, 1.5, 2.5, 3? That's what I mean when I'm going to ask you, just because it forces you to think how you would do that approach. And in principle, since it's totally independent, why don't you put a number in the chat box independently? Go ahead. Find the chat box and put a number in there. I really want you to go through this. It forces you to think what you think, because this is subjective. And no matter, we're going to get a little bit more quantitative, but you know what? There's always going to be a subjective one. Okay, yep, I'm seeing them come in. Good, good. Okay. Some of you are not doing it. Is that because you're uncomfortable? You can talk to me. Talk to me.
Do you want to?
Mostly I've got, and I think this is going to everybody, so you can now look at what I'm getting. Mostly 2s, some 3s, 2.5s. Okay.
Murray, could you raise the sketch a little bit?
Oh, on your screen you're not? I can't. No, it's filled up on my screen. You might be able to do it at your end. It turns out GoToMeeting gives you some flexibility in the screen that you're seeing. But I can't actually. Okay, so that's one way. That's one way of ranking it, and you could then, in fact, the people who do this, this comes from an approach that was called Lively. They might have a second transcript. They would do the same thing with that, and then they would choose the highest ranking one. Period. So that would be one approach. Okay. Now, just so you know, the person who actually did this gave this one a 1.5, and the reason they gave, and we've talked about this, and it's just, I just can't overemphasize how conversations and talking amongst people, I think, is really helpful, because it helps bring us all sort of to the same mindset, and a realization that even after you get the same mindset and agree to disagree about certain things, you're going to have differences in rankings, just like we did here, of about 1. Well, here maybe the difference is maybe plus or minus a half, let's say. But, you know, there are going to be built-in differences. Okay, so this is what I would call highly subjective. The one that many of us are using, we use in the winning entanglement approach, is this TARG SRI scale. And I'm going to show you that in detail, because I'm going to want to go over that in detail, because there are really a lot of people who are using this now. And that comes from Stanford Research Institute and Russell Targ. And then I would say the minimally subjective one that I know about is this computer-assisted system, CAS, which has an approach where there's still a judge who makes inputs, but it comes from a list of possible things that would be in the transcript, high-level things in this transcript. I don't even know if this is one, but it might be, is there water involved, okay? And then that person would, and this is where the subjectivity comes in, would come up with a 0 to 10 scale. So yeah, I said water, but is that enough for a 10? You know, I didn't draw anything. And anyway, it tries to be as objective as possible, and it gets itself compared to what many other people have done looking at similar transcripts, ask those same questions. So it is also subjective, but I would call it minimally subjective. So now let's look at sort of the moderate one and the one which a lot of us are using. And this is this TARG scale. So it's a little bit more detailed than that truly subjective one where they had 1, 2, or 3. They're 1, and maybe, in fact, they probably do have a 0. It wasn't on that table, but they probably do. So that would be the same as the 0 here. Little correspondence. And now we bring in what happens quite often is no correspondence happens where you just can't find anything that matches. Usually there's some stuff that matches, but look, after you do this for a while, you realize that there is just raw chance involved. I mean, if you were to say red, guess what? There are an awful lot of photos out there that have red in it. So that alone is certainly not going to be enough to suggest results beyond chance. So you get this sense of what chance is. And if you think the transcript and the photo site are at the chance level, you give it a 2. But now you get to the point where there's just some, not only correct and incorrect, but those correct ones and the number of them are getting to the point now where you really think you've made contact, psychic contact with the target through your subconscious, you've connected with the matrix, you've connected with the universe of collective consciousness, whatever you want to call it. You have made this psychic connection right on the margin. So this is a mixture of correct and incorrect elements, but enough to say, yep, I've made some contact here. We'll call that a 3. Now a 4 is you're confident now that you had this psychic connection because you have some good correspondence with several. So not just 1, not just 2, but several. What does several mean? This is where subjectivity starts, is in all of this, whether you like it or not. As a judge, there's a certain amount of subjectivity. Several matchable elements intermixed with some incorrect information. Okay? So you get a sense of that. And each of us will have our own sense, which will be somewhat different. Because given one transcript and one picture, everybody is not going to say it's a 4. But some will probably say it's maybe a 3, maybe a 5, maybe a 3.5. We've just found over the years that people are often, God, it might be a 3, but you know what? It looks like a 4. I'm going to give it a 3.5. And we like to say, and as you all know, ARV, we're applying it to sports and financials. If you give it a 3.5, that means as a judge, your gut is basically saying that I'd be willing to put a few bucks on this. I'd be willing to wager. It's strong enough that, yes, I'm in the psychic matching regime here. The viewer did indeed get the information from the matrix, say. Okay, so this tries to put into context this jump from the margin to where you feel really good. Now a 5 is excellent. By the time you get to a 5, you not only have good correspondence with several, but you've raised the level of matching to words of unambiguous, unique, matchable elements. So unambiguous, unique, matchable. What does unambiguous mean? exactly. It means you really can't mistake it for something else. You're not stretching. When you're down in this level, you say, yeah, I can see where the person's subconscious made this connection, and there are matches, but unambiguous is stronger. Uh, and anyway, when anybody gives a 5, they'll write down, and I'll ask them to write down, um, okay, tell me what you felt was unambiguous and unique and matchable about that. And they will, and, I may, in fact, see something that I would call unambiguous that they didn't, and vice versa. But as a judge, remember the judging is largely intellectual. The judges are intellectual beings. I would say in this area it's probably 90% intellectual, but there's a 10% intuitive feeling which this really is unambiguous. This person was really tuned into this in an unambiguous, unique way. And it may have been you. Remember, self-judging is a major part of we, for example, and you know that this is what you meant, even though you might not have put it down exactly as, say, if you're visual as you saw it. So that's a 5. 6 goes even further. It sort of has to have the elements of a 5, but in addition, you start getting this AOL stuff, the analytical overlay kinds of things, where, it came initially from the subconscious, the analytical mind jumped in, and indeed it was right. One of the things when I took training in CRV from Lynn Buchanan, he used to say the thing about analytical overlays are they're usually wrong, but not always. So if this is a time when they're right, you give yourself credit for that. But just getting that alone and everything else being wrong would not qualify it for a 6, because you need to have relatively little incorrect information. And then a 7 is basically spot on. Okay, so that's what that TARG scale means. So now, if you were judging something like this, using the TARG scale, now notice you as a judge would have this in front of you when I'm judging, and other people's, which I do sometimes independently, or mostly I'm self-judging now. I have a pencil and paper, and I would mark things. I'd mark things that are right with maybe a check. Some people use a yes or a no. If I get a really good match, I'll circle it. Oh my, like I happen to think this isn't too bad right here. Water, I notice, is an AOL. Okay, so you take a look at this one. Okay, so you're noting, maybe I should not have said what I did, but I did. But imagine if you're doing this on your own. Now go ahead on the 0 to 7 scale. What do you think you each would give it? And put it in the chat box again. Mm-hmm. Okay, go ahead. I've got most of you. Why don't you it's like it's worth jumping in, and I will say that experience is the best teacher here for sure. And it's interesting. I've got a range here that you're seeing this. This is going to everybody, right? So it looks like the lowest is a 2.5 and the highest is a 5.
There's a 6 there now.
Oh, and there's a 6. Uh-huh. Yeah, and there's a 6.
How is this different from the last time we did it?
What do you mean?
When we gave scores 10 minutes ago for the same picture.
Yeah, but that was on a 1, 2, 3 scale.
Oh, I didn't realize. Okay.
Yeah. And when you gave your 2.5, was that on the old scale or?
It was on the TARG scale, yeah. Sorry, I wasn't listening.
Okay. So you see you're on the low side, and so it's very interesting to hear your logic versus the 6 side. So let me, in fact, go back.
Actually, once I made a tick chart, I would probably go higher, yeah. I mean, I don't want to influence everybody else, but I could say how I
Well,
scored.
yeah, everybody did it. Yeah, why did you give it a 2.5? I mean, I think it's good for people to understand that everyone comes from a different perspective.
What does it say over there on the white?
Water or clouds, white, picket fence, or
right.
approximate. For me, that's, after I drew this, then an AOL into my mind came picket fence.
Yeah, no, I gave credit for the yellow flowers, and the surfboard is like sticking up out of the water there, and you drew that. The jumble, pretty much everything has its place there.
But you only gave it a 2.5.
I didn't give credit for everything at first.
Okay. So I'm just asking. So you would still think it should be a 2.5 or?
No, now that I've made a tick chart and given credit for every correct element, it would probably be more like a 4.
Okay. So that fits in with most everyone else. And the lowest then is a 3.5, which is wagerable. This was a hit.
It's interesting that judges can change their mind after they look and hear the conversation. The awareness changes.
It's true, and notice as a judge you do not have that luxury because usually you're by yourself. And that's why that's part of the learning process of being a judge. And I know for me, I also look as a judge at the feedback, what happened. Also, the viewers will often come back to me, and I encourage that, to talk to me about, what was it so low, what did I think about it, that sort of thing. I think it's very valuable to have the viewers and the judges talk to each other. But I think what Scott did this time was he did it sort of quickly, and as he said, he looked at the pictures first, which a lot of judges do because many, many people happen to be very visual and draw pictures a lot. It turns out I always do a mix, and often my words are more accurate than my pictures. But I do think it's important for the judges to look at everything and, give the judging the time it deserves. Which again, I would say all phases tend to be the same. The remote viewing, the judging, the feedback sessions. In ARV, it's been my experience, unless you get a 20-page CRV session, the 1 or 2 page ARV sessions can be judged in 5 or 10 minutes, just like the remote viewing session and your feedback session. So that's kind of the time frame.
Marty?
Uh-huh.
I revised mine back down because not looking at your sketch when we were making that judgment, I forgot that you said white picket fence. But I thought where it says that you named the function, I thought the water and the clouds, those look so much like clouds.
Yep.
And calling them water. and also the motion and the falling and the life forms in the jumble. I thought that qualifies as describing the actual function. And the wood, I mean, you could call the kayak wood.
Right.
I think that's enough. The only thing I think was at all off was the white picket fence. And even the yellow flowers, I mean.
Right. Got the color.
So even though they're not actually flowers, but I guess technically I have to move that down below a 5 to meet the criteria, but that's awful darn close to a 6 if you ask me.
Okay. We're right now, with what you just said, at one of the critical aspects of judging, which is you have to learn how to trust yourself. Your 6, in my opinion, is just as valuable as your 4.75. And over time, you're going to get to a place where you are going to feel comfortable so that when you get the same kind of transcript, picture match, you will give it roughly the same number. In my opinion, that's the most important part of becoming a judge. It's this self-consistency and not being influenced by what other people say and do. You have to become a self-contained, self-consistent judge.
Well, I think I was more influenced by looking at the sketch again than what others were saying.
Yeah, well, that's fine, but my statement still holds. Another way people get influenced, judges are generally judging more than one picture, and sometimes they'll be influenced, oh, you know what? You know, this really is much more like the other one, and they'll go back and raise the judging. And sometimes that's okay, again, if they're being self-consistent, but they should do them independently. Also, hey, let's say you're judging 4 people and 3 of them are going one way, and this one comes and it looks like it's going the other, and you know that, you might tend to downplay it a little bit. And that might go the other way. Should not do that. You need to train yourself, and it's really wonderful because it's sort of part of this whole process we're in, where we're building up a better relationship with our consciousness and building up the relationship between the intellect and the intuitive and the consciousness and integrating all of this together. The judging is really the place where a lot of that comes together. And it's one of the reasons I frankly love self-judging. I am actually an advocate of self-judging. Because when I'm doing my remote viewing session, things come up. There's some feelings that I never get down, even though I really believe you should get everything down. You know, sometimes I don't. You know, the word jumble, for example, you know, yes, that was the word that came up with that. But when I saw that water, I knew that was the appropriate thing. And as a judge, that was really very strong for me. And of course, life forms, motions, falling, all of that. I would self-judge this as something for me, knowing me and everything, as a 5 or a 6. So I'd probably give it a 5.5 just because I don't, you know, I don't know. I tend not to go to 6s too much. And let me say one other thing with the AOL here. Like picket fence, at least when I judge, based on this idea that AOLs are usually wrong because it's the intellect part, I actually don't deduct anything if it's wrong, but I do give credit if it's right. That's me. Judging, there isn't any exact right way to do it. Now, some of you may disagree, and if you do, you know, a lot of you have been around a long time too. Speak up. But what I'm giving you here is the general framework, and then you've got all of the targ words, which, even if you use a 0, 1, 2, 3 system, this is generally how you want to put them. He's just spread them out, I think, very nicely. But then you, as the judge, have to fit the CR you give it.
Tom wants to say something. Tom, you said you wanted to interject.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I see the white picket fence. I was thinking this in regards to conversation of yes, that's the one, the other gentleman, and how judges may differ. The white picket fence, to me, it's white picket fence like would be the yellow vest that the man's wearing. You drew it out and then wrote yellow flowers, so the drawing would have 2 matches, but the AOL was like it was white picket fence like, but not a white picket fence. So I see that. And then also you hit on a number of other things that I felt when you saw the word jumble, or pointed it out.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that when I first saw the picture, because I had a session last night and I came up with churning, but sometimes I found that I can't come up with the right descriptive, but it's close enough. But then when I see the picture, it's that's the connection. So that's all I wanted to say.
Well, no, thank you for that. That's very good. In fact, I want you to know this is the first time I've looked at this particular shape here as a picket fence sort of thing.
Yeah, and you do 4 pickets too.
So
that's
that's
4 lines on the vest.
My interpretation, and where I actually gave it credit, is so interesting, and you'll see this, I think, in my feedback, is I saw one of this being very much the shape of the board here.
Agreed.
So thank you for making that connection.
So has anyone seen the water rat?
No, what's that?
Right above your initial, right there. Like, first thing that hit me was like, it looks like a water rat.
Oh, this thing right here?
The eye is on the left.
Yeah. Oh.
It
Oh,
jumps
I
out.
see.
Facing the left direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's swimming left.
Oh, that's interesting. You must love the cloud game. Okay, what do you see in the clouds, folks?
Yeah, I love that one.
No, but yeah, very interesting.
Nice session.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can say something,
Yeah,
I also saw the picket fence that you drew. I thought it was the kayak or the surfboard that we're seeing, and I also look a lot at composition. Where are things located? Like you said, you put a rectangle and you try to find the overall composition of the photo.
Mm-hmm.
I give that, I actually consider that like an element, because if I feel that things are on the left and I had a certain shape and I didn't know what it was, or I didn't know how to name it, but I felt there was like a darkish shape or something moving on the left, I would consider that in my self-judging, even if it's not very obvious in the transcript. I would always consider that as a correct element, because I know there was something moving on the left side that kind of caught my attention. So composition, I think, is in its own way also a part of the elements, even if it's not deliberately maybe worded, or I'm not sure how if I'm using the right language here to explain.
Yeah, no, I understand what you say. That's excellent.
Okay. All right, just wanted to add that.
Yeah,
and I see that a lot in your transcript, like the whole movement of the water that's going up,
mm-hmm.
which matches totally on the bottom, the whole water movement,
Mm-hmm.
and the yellow flowers, like it's exactly the right shaping the right position of the life jacket and the kayak that's standing kind of pointing skyward.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really just totally on.
Okay, that's wonderful, and I do believe a lot of people that is really valid for them, and I would say that's a valid thing to bring into your judging, especially for yourself. I get the feeling that you see this a lot in your own transcripts, and again, this is
Right.
where self-judging comes in. I just want to say I know there are some people who very consistently reverse things. It's like they tend to see things upside down. And so those people, when they self-judge, take that into account as well. So I just want to add, I agree with everything you said, especially for you, but I just want to add that there are variations between people which are worth noting, and certainly when you do self-judging, you will note those over time for yourself.
Right.
Like music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments, questions on this part? Okay, very good. Now I want to go into one of the other aspects of judging. You've now really done your judging. You came up with the CRs. You need to record them. You all know that I'm a scientist. Spent my whole working career as a scientist. One of the key things about science is data. Virtually, well, let's say at least most. I was going to say virtually all, but it's probably not true. But most major scientific discoveries were first found because of data which then needed to be fit into a model. And often the data does not fit a model, and that then leads to a better model. But keeping data is important, and I am certainly spending a lot of my time looking at all the data which indeed is being gathered, and I think we are learning important things about precognition from that data. So let's just talk about that. What we've done so far is taken one coordinate. I took this from another place, so it's not the same coordinate, but that doesn't matter. One coordinate, one photo, and come up with one confidence ranking. So that would get put in. Now this comes from a we-like approach. Let's just call that photo for now photo A. But in ARV, there are people who are putting a Google spreadsheet, and I think they call this photo A. So you would put your number there. Now in binary, you would then erase your memory as well as you can and do now a new independent judging against that same transcript against photo B. And now you would do this judging, as I say, totally as independently as possible, not wanting, in ARV, we know one's right, one isn't. You'd like these scores to be maybe as different as possible. None of that. You're now a judge. So as independently as possible, you go ahead and you do the judging. And then, of course, you put your second coordinate in here. So with one transcript, you put one coordinate in here, you put your second coordinate in there, and you hit a submit button someplace, and it now becomes part of the record. You have now submitted your judging. Well, if you happen to be doing two coordinates like we do in we, but even in ARV, there have been plenty of circumstances, and I've done this in the past, where you just simply want to get an independent judgment on maybe two other photos, maybe the same photos, and we use the same photos. But then guess what? Then you go to the second transcript, and first you judge it against photo A, and then you take the second transcript, judge it against photo B, and then you have 4 coordinates to put in. And all of this is so that you have a kind of redundancy, a kind of inner check. I mean, all of this is intended to increase the hit rates that you're going to get as an individual viewer, as well as the groups will get. One of the things that has been shown over and over again is that redundancy is a good thing. It does indeed help. Okay, so this now is the way you would do the independent analysis. I think it's pretty clear that, you know, this coordinate would go with this photo in this box, and this coordinate with this photo in this box. Here they're called photo A and B, and then similarly here with this box and this box. Some people are just not used to seeing data put in this fashion. So that's why I'm trying to be as clear as I can. And, you know, after you do it once or twice, it becomes rather natural. Now, winning entanglements, it's this exactly, as opposed to, I've been talking in general. The only difference is what was called photo A and photo B in the winning entanglements approach is called winning photo site and the other photo site. And as a judge, you don't need to know any more. These are just labels. And you fill in the confidence rankings. Any questions on the judging? I'll go to feedback next.
And like you said before, they can put comments in the comment box down below on what matched between their photo and the transcript.
And that's exactly right. And please do that, because the part of the feedback will include all of your earlier statements. So I guess what I'm saying is these comment boxes become part of your record, part of the data, and they are available to you to help you. So I really do encourage putting in comments, what's ever going on with you. Certainly if you give it 3.5 or above, you know, say why, a few reasons on what matched. Okay.
I would say the personal comments are actually more important than anything the judge can say, because it's all about self-learning. It really helps to grow confidence within ourselves as viewers.
Yep. Thank you, Nancy. Okay. So now let's talk a little bit.
I think,
go ahead.
I think Tom wanted to mention bleed through there in the comments in the chat.
Right. If you get these bleed-throughs, definitely note them, and they will, as a judge, you need to come to a place where, I don't know, you feel, well, I don't know how, I tell you why I'm hesitating here, because this is pretty controversial. There was an earlier approach called 1ARV where what's called bleed through, and that was where I introduced that idea. There were actually 3 potential transcripts, and you could actually have bleed through, which could help you in a way. Now, when you're using the word bleed through, what you are doing is not totally independently judging the two. And I've, frankly, and we changed my position because you don't have this third transcript that was a part of the bleed through, and I won't go into all the details of that. But my current feeling, now this is me, each judge has to come up with the way they do it and just be self-consistent. But for me, I truly want to ignore that, because if you really do each transcript, photo site pairing independently, you won't have, there is no such thing as bleed through. It just happens that that transcript happens to match both of those, but I'm judging it, I don't care. I'm judging all of that in terms of that pairing only. And that is what I do. That's what I recommend. And if you notice bleed through and want to take it into account, and I've seen many of your comments, some of you are doing that. I'm not critical of it. That is a valid approach. And if you feel comfortable with it, do it. But, you know, again, over time, you get to watch yourself and you get to notice, you know, did in fact, at the end, after you too know what the correct feedback is, did that make sense? Is that working for you? Or maybe you want to change your judging a little bit. This self-learning that Nancy just referred to is the key to everything we're doing here. And I frankly never see it ending. I just see ourselves getting more refined, getting better at this, picking up other subtleties, et cetera, et cetera.
So then he wanted to know the difference between bleed through and entanglement. And then entanglement is part of the name of the We protocol too, so it'd be good to mention that.
Yeah, okay. Well, the idea, of course, is, and this happens to be a good example, is the entanglement between, like, the word jumble. You know, I was very nicely here, and I can guarantee you most of my sessions are not all this good. I consider this one to be a very good one. But here I very nicely entangled, and this was a winner, so I entangled very nicely with really all the key elements in here. The life forms, you know, this could have been a little better if it would have said persons, but certainly the motion, and I felt particularly good about the falling because it's really clear here. I wish I would have gotten sounds, which I didn't. A lot of people get sounds in pictures like this, but I got motion. So this is what I mean when I talk about entanglement. But sometimes you get, and that's, in this case, I definitely call it real entanglement because I entangled with the feedback photo. But sometimes you get entanglements which might even look this strong to you as a judge with what turns out to be the wrong picture. And that then would be bleed through, if you would, or displacement. Now, you know, you'd like to say, hey, that wasn't real, it wasn't real entanglement, but both as a judge, you can't tell. You know, it's just, I don't know how to tell. Now, maybe there are going to be some judges out there, maybe you're out there already, that somehow using an intuitive edge can distinguish between the real entanglement with the winning picture, the real picture, versus a apparent entanglement. But I certainly don't know how to do that. It is my judgment that we'll probably never get to 100%. And one of the reasons, and in fact the primary reason in my judgment, are these what we've now called false entanglements, displacement-like things, bleed-through-like things, some of which may happen by chance. Hey, the color red occurs in a lot of pictures. Some which may occur by actually peeking at the wrong picture. You know, you're not supposed to do that as a remote viewer, but guess what? For whatever reason, the subconscious does it sometimes. And I happen to believe that there's something analogous to the uncertainty principle in quantum mechanics, a kind of chaos that frankly is probably quite valuable. I think it's just built into the universe, which causes this to happen, but it causes it to happen at a level which is tolerable. Hey, let's just live with it. Hey, have you ever dropped something and broke a glass and hated it? And, you know, gravity is out there, you know, it's something you have to live with. And I think uncertainty and the fact that stuff like this is going to happen sometimes, that's fine. And so that's why I now really believe you judge them independently, and sometimes you're going to get this bleed through. And what that'll cause is maybe it'll cause your scores to become closer together. Okay, that's fine. And in data analysis, we might, over the long term, then begin to pick that up.
I have a question for you. I have a feedback question regarding regarding bleed-through.
Mm-hmm.
This particular photo and transcript was submitted through the Colorado what's his son's name? Chris Smith's method. Mm-hmm. And so in this method, the viewer doesn't ever see the other picture.
Right.
In self-judging, like in We, which is really quite fun, the viewer gets to see both sides and kind of decides for the viewer independently says, oh, I got that. How come I keep pulling information from both? I've got great entanglement, but I'm pulling information from both. My question, this is a philosophical question, in self-judging with both targets, mm-hmm. Both photos, is it possible that the feedback, when I as a viewer see all of my bleed through, if that's a form of feedback that maybe enforces that, develops that wonderful skill, which we don't really want?
That was when ARV was first started, okay, in the 70s, and for many, many, many years, that was the assumption. That was the going-in assumption, that you always had what are still called independent judges. So a judge would be the only one that would see the two possible matches to the one transcript, okay, in binary ARV, period. What was discovered, much to everybody's dismay, is viewers would viewers would get, back in that context when they were doing this, viewers would get these terrific descriptions of the wrong target. And the viewers would never see that target. Just like in this case, I never saw the other target. But I happen to know the judge actually thought I got some matches on that target as well. But this was why, and to my knowledge, Greg K., right, none of us can pronounce his last name, was the first one to actually say independent judging works, guys. And I started working with it as well. And what I found was, I think for many people, it actually works even better. Turns out Mel Riley, in working with me, used self-judging, and he had a case where there was a Indian, and you know he's into the Indian culture, with a kind of a drum, and in his transcript he had an X, which I happened to also independently judge that, so he judged it, I was looking at it, and I actually marked that as an X. There was no X there. He later told me, and he gave a lot of credit to that, and there were other good things on the transcript, that the back of that drum happens to have a X. The way it's built is it has two pieces of like thin canvas, tape or something, holding it together, which I thought was very interesting in terms of things that happen in self-judging, which are positive that you might have. Also, the thing about memory. Anyway, what has now been shown is that this displacement, in those days it was clearly called displacement, when a person got a really, really good description, never shown the picture, the only one that knows it is the judge and the tasker, so it's called displacement. The person was getting the information from this universe of collective consciousness, from the matrix. The information was put there by the judge. When the judge looked at both pictures, somebody has to look at both pictures. And so it is indeed unavoidable. However, what I think has now been well demonstrated is that in self-judging, it's no more of a problem than it was before, because the remote viewer is very clear on their intention, and that is to connect up with the feedback session. It's got nothing to do with the judging. They jump over the judging. The judging is an intellectual thing. So, I mean, that's really important to kind of get, because it reinforces how important your intention is to send your consciousness to this moment right now. We're looking at a feedback. And when I did that, okay, I looked at this, and what you're seeing here with the red is what I always do. I always get a colored pencil and I mark up my transcript. And you can see I checked, I circled this. I was particularly impressed with that. I checked this because of the shape. In fact, I put an X against multiple picket fence, but I, put white, put yellow, put an X against the flowers. I frankly didn't know what to do with this. At the time, and again, I don't write down all the AOLs, but I thought those are sort of mountain-like or big wave, but I thought mountain-like when I did it, just because that's what was going on in my mind. And so I just didn't put anything with those. I guess I could have said those were the waves. Certainly, in fact, now that I'm looking, that looks very much like what's going on here, doesn't it? And I feel it's okay to stretch. Give yourself as much. Feel really good about it. Match everything that matched. And when you have a good hit like this, that's really easy to do and fun to do and really enjoy it. But that's what I do. I also often, and I just didn't do it in this case really because I just was thinking about this presentation actually more than doing a real feedback session. But I will sometimes on another sheet of paper or even in a corner here put additional things I wished I had done. Like here, I really wished I had done sounds. You know how I say we're going to be able to improve constantly? I'm really working on trying to get sounds from sites. I was working for a while with someone that was one of his real strengths. He once got a beehive and he got buzz, buzz all over his transcript. It was rather incredible.
Smells too.
It smells too, exactly. And tastes, why not? Just have them come in.
And emotions. This one had emotions.
And and fright, right. And I've seen lots of transcripts and other people can do that. Well, there's one point of view, which is know what your strengths are and have the judging and analysts know what your strengths are. And I think that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think even a stronger personal point of view is I want to build those capabilities in myself. Why not? And so I often use the feedback time to do that. I believe.
Can I make an observation here?
Please.
Regarding this transcript and this photograph, in Joe McMonagle's method of judging, he lists all the statements and then he lists all the gestalts. So he has two groups of data. It's on another piece of paper. This is judging. So all the statements are written down like water, clouds, white, picket, fence, yellow, all of those things. And probably the little drawings, like the little sharp things, would be a statement. Mm-hmm. And then that interesting long thing in the middle would be a statement. All these are statements. And then the gestalt is this, like the ideogram that's up in the upper left, and the word motion, life forms, falling would be gestalts. And he gives lots of heavy weight to the gestalts, much more than the statements. But he makes a percentage, all the correct statements and versus the incorrect statements, and does this percentage thing. But I think it's interesting that the gestalts have more weight, and the initial image right out of the universe, the very first one, he gives a little extra weight to as well. So everybody's different, but I think these gestalts in this transcript were just spot on. Every gestalt was perfect.
Nancy, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I did want to bring up Joe McMonagle's approach in particular, and I see Chris. Did you?
Chris doesn't have a microphone today, so he'll have to.
Okay. Did you judge it by any chance? So go into the chat. Did you? I had sent this off to Chris and actually asked him, because he happens to have taken really good notes on what Joe McMonagle did, and I don't know if you had time to judge this using McMonagle's approach. Nancy, thank you. You just gave a good summary of that.
Well, I've got my notes from it in front of me, and Chris might be, I don't know if he's chatting. I don't want to override what he's got, but because I haven't run this through Joe's method. Mm-hmm. But by listing all of the statements, all the gestalts and all of the statements, all of them, whether they're right or wrong, every single item on the paper gets listed. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then figuring out the percentage of correct gestalts and the correct statements, and adding those together and dividing it by 2, he gets an average, and that's a percentage. And so anything over 75% is wagerable. Okay. So it's a mathematical formula that works. It's a little bit longer, but he feels like it's pretty accurate, and I think he did that with the folks at SRI. So that was a good method for them. It's more data and analytical than intuitive.
Okay, you know what? I think if anybody's interested in learning more about that, ask a question because I think other people will be interested as well. Rather than just, sending you or Chris an email, ask a question on the app discussion board, and then, Chris and or Nancy can answer it and give you some details on it. The subjects come up before. I couldn't put my hand on a specific webinar where it's been discussed. But this is probably down to the level of minimal subjective. Again, you have to decide whether or not, a shape like this, does that count as a yes or a no? So all these have a certain level of subjectivity, but it tends to be CAS at the level, I think, of CAS-like, and being as objective as possible.
It's really similar to CAS when you look at the math and how he does it. It's really similar.
Yeah, and I think, in fact, the two may very, Ed May and Joe have worked together so much that there may very well be a connection there. Okay, one other thing I really want to emphasize, because it's a point of view which I think is like really almost spot on and not one we're used to thinking of, and that is precognition begins with the feedback session. What we've been talking about here, paying attention to all of this here, entangling, notice right here, we are entangling with the truth. We know this is the right answer. Adding energy to the entanglement here knowing the truth, putting the energy in here, circling this, checking it, doing what you wish you would do next time. It's not going to change your remote viewing session, but it'll help you in the future. Your initial remote viewing session, I'd like to think of it as coming after the feedback session, as if information started here and moved backwards to your remote viewing session. Where in the hell did this word jumble come from? In many ways, it came from, and this is a point of view which I think someday may almost become commonly accepted, that precognition is around all the time. Information indeed is traveling backwards all the time. And at the remote viewing session, I managed to bring it up to the consciousness level and have the word jumble come in, have life forms come in, have motion come in, and falling come in. But it's because the information from what, and it may even be coming back from right now. Look at all the energy that's being put into this picture right now. Maybe at remote viewing time I was picking it up from here too. But my intention was to pick it up from the feedback session, which in fact I did, and you're seeing how I did it then. Also notice the red here, I always go over these numbers, and I still like to say them out loud. And I say it out loud at remote viewing time when I write them down. So I get kind of a kinesthetic connection, which brings me to that particular place and time. I happen to believe all the information is available. This is truly a universe of consciousness of all sentient beings, past, present, and future, all over the universe. So that's a lot of information. How do I get to just this piece of information? Intention, and then the attention, which I'm now paying. That's why I do this. I'm paying attention to it. I pay attention to how it feels. The shapes. It isn't even so much the numbers for me as it's the shapes and the way I'm moving, which I do at the remote viewing time, and I do it at feedback time. But again, the viewer is in charge. This is what I do, as I got very specific about it with you. You have to come up with something that feels right for you. And the beauty of this self-judged ARV approach is, think about it. All three stages are you. The remote viewing, the judging, the feedback. It's really a remarkable system to tune your consciousness. And I believe that this idea that the information is always out there, that one way of viewing it is that it flows backward in time, but really it's just always out there. And at remote viewing time, it's your consciousness that has the capability of picking up the information from the feedback session, which is your intention.
And then on the feedback page, you have another chance to put in comments, and that's another way to create entanglement.
That's right. That's right. It gives you that capability on purpose. In fact, I'll even go one step further. There are technologies out there, which I just haven't had time to get into, that can read words and pick up things from it, which at judging time, I think I may be able to use and automate. And there may be correlations. For example, if the words that you put in is, I did this, but, I really wasn't feeling very good about it. I might be able to associate that if it happens often enough, and this is where I need the software, to keep records of negative feelings, say, with hits and miss rates. So not only are the words extraordinarily valuable, potentially valuable for you, which is why they were originally put in there, but I believe downstream analysis of those words may even be helpful for the judge, the analyst judge, for making decisions. But that's yet to be shown. Now, there's another aspect to feedback. This is all focused on one prediction, and you get your feedback from it. But on a longer term and a more analytical basis, notice here we're really getting into our consciousness. We're doing this entanglement using our deeper intuitive sense, intending to not only entangle it now, but to entangle it with our feedback session. I'm sorry, entangle it with our remote viewing session. So we're entangling it now with our feedback session, but our intention is to entangle it with the remote viewing session. Send the information back, light it up, make it strong enough so the remote viewer, you, which is earlier in time compared to where you are now in feedback, will in fact get these words, visions, feel the emotions, and write them down, put together a witty transcript. But over the longer term, we generate transcripts like this. Here it was called success rate. It's called hit rate. Passes or ignored. And I believe this kind of information can become very, very valuable for you as you watch it from time to time. And different people, some like to look at it all the time. Some don't like to look at it at all. It's irrelevant to them. Again, each person is unique. You just have to become comfortable within yourself. And, you know, some people like to look at it maybe once a week. These kind of plots are available at the end of the feedback session with the words and your history. But I want to give you an example of a few examples here and how this might affect the mindset and how your consciousness goes through a true journey. Here's a person that started with 14 hits, no misses, 9 passes. So you can imagine how they felt. You know, this is rather extraordinary. Then they started doing misses. This is a cumulative hit rate. So after, 23 total, so this is session 23 here, their hit rate was 100% since there were no misses. Then they started getting misses, went down to 90%. By their 100th session, they were at 70%. By their 198th session, they were at 66%, which is the kind of number we see over the long term that good viewers get. I want to show another person who ended off at 65%, virtually the same percentage, but look at this history. They went down to, 25%, and came back up. Everyone has a unique experience. Charts like this are not quite as unique as fingerprints, but pretty close. Everybody has their own journey. Everybody has their own way of going through and getting there. I just think the people that do this, it's during this phase that their determination to succeed, that their learning process that's going on is rather extraordinary. A lot of people that do this, and I would say the pattern that we see most often is actually one of beginner's luck type for people who come to this brand new, then dips, and then going back up. It's this dip phase where a lot of people leave. It's almost like it's built into the system that somewhere along the line you're going to go through a place where looking into yourself about whether or not you believe precognition is real, whether you believe you have got it, you're confronted with that. Okay, so you can see they came to the same place, very different journeys.
Marty, it helps to see all of those because I think it would be so easy for somebody new to, oh my gosh, I dropped, I had a drop, I quit.
That's right.
I mean, to see that this is normal.
That's exactly right.
Thing. Keep in there.
That's exactly right.
Embrace it.
Now, I just introduced yesterday to the we people this chart, which you will now see after you do your feedback. And what it is the red curve is the same as before. It's cumulative. It includes the passes in terms of the session count, but not in terms of the hit rate. But if you notice, after a while, when you start getting up to 50, 60 of these, this begins changing relatively slowly because it's 1 out of 80, so it doesn't have much of a percentage. So I've now introduced what is a 10 trade day moving average and a 25 trade day moving average. So let me make sure you understand what that is. This ignores passes as well, but what this means is, for example, in this case right here, where these overlap would be the first day that there were 10 trades, and of those 10 trades on that day, there was a 20, well, they're 10, so it's probably a 20% average, so 2 out of 10. Notice here in the cumulative, this is, started low. This person started rather low, is working their way up, but overall isn't even yet at 50%. And in fact, this is another reason for having this, because they're learning and doing stuff, because their 10-day, which just looks at the last 10 tradable days. So on their 70th session, they actually got 10 hits in a row in terms of the previous 10 non-pass sessions. And you can almost see them here. Notice this was up, this was up, this was up, this was up, this was up. So there were 10 of them that are in here. In fact, here you can see there are probably 2 ups. Anyway, that's the meaning of this. So there were 100 of them, and then there were some misses. And then the green curve is the 25-day. I would call this the short term. 10 days in the precognition world is really short term, though getting 10 in a row is quite significant. That's, that was wonderful. And she didn't even see this at the time. So this is her statistics, though I suspect she probably knew she was going through a good streak here. But this would be relatively short term, and then the 25-day is intermediate in my point of view, because I'm looking for people then to have a 25-day which stays. Let's hope she stays up at this 70% and maybe even moves up further. I don't know. I believe there's an uncertainty principle at work. None of us know what that level is. We're right at the cutting edge and beginning to find out. And we can see transcripts like this, and let's say by the time she gets out to 200, it's roughly stayed like this. Okay? I don't think she should give up trying to do better, but it would certainly give some indication that for the long term, she in fact has achieved something like a 70% long-term hit rate. And, time will tell. Here's where she is now. Okay, so, I've gone over this slowly. I've spent a lot of time on it. I do believe it's extraordinarily important, the judging and the feedback. It is a journey. Keep recogging and learning. And I just hope, I know we're having fun. I just know it. It isn't even like I don't have to say have fun. We wouldn't be together this long if so many of us aren't enjoying this journey. And make those mistakes. That's where you learn. Take chances. Be silly. Be imperfect. That's part of us. I think it's built in a positive way. And I can just, that's like an intuitive feeling I have. And really learn to trust yourself. Trust your own consciousness. That is yourself. Okay. Any questions, comments? And then we will go on to Alexis, who may or may not be here. No, he's not here.
Marty, this is Ulysses, and as I've mentioned in some of our correspondence, I just barely took the course at TMI from Joe last week, and so this is all new to me.
Okay.
And I have no experience in any of these kind of actually placing bets. It's really interesting going through the processes that you use for the ARV and all that stuff. But if someone wants to actually place bets and all that stuff, is there a consensus, or have people found some best ways that they could recommend for the various markets like Forex and currency trading or pari-mutuel betting, that kind of stuff? Any websites that seem to be the most popular as far as learning how to do all of that stuff and getting up to speed and the best way to access it?
Okay. Yes. Let me point you. Now, where do you live?
Well, I'm in Atlanta currently. I
Okay.
live kind of back and forth between Atlanta and Utah.
Okay. The reason I ask is, and I just have to say this, as far as I know, though Atlanta, New Jersey has legal gambling, as does Las Vegas. Does Atlanta have sportsbook? Do you know?
I don't really know. I've never really made a bet before, but oddly enough, I grew up in Las Vegas until I was about 12. And in Utah, I live, probably 100 miles from Vegas. So
Okay.
Vegas is much more accessible to me than any place else. But other than Las Vegas, I don't know anything about betting. But I thought you could do it online from anywhere.
And that's what I'm going to suggest. But you have to know that it is probably not 100% legal. And as far as I know, nobody has been harassed for doing it, just because it is a multi-billion-dollar business. But it is offshore, and this happens to be bookmaker. Was it .com? I've moved over to Forex so much, so I've lost some of this. No, do you remember the exact URL, Scott? I know you're still doing this. Scott, are you there?
You were using 5 Dimes for a while, weren't you?
Or 5 Dimes is another one. But I think but the one I liked the best was bookmaker.
.eu, I think.
Yeah. Right. So this is one which has been around a long time. It gets good marks by people who follow them. And they usually somewhere have a teach me or learn me thing, but I would mark this one down. Here, I can put this in the chat box for you. Another one is 5 dimes. Is that a .com? No, it looks like it's a .eu too, maybe. Let's see. No.
Yeah, EU.
Yeah, but here I have it here. Nope. Now, yeah, it does come up for you. Okay. So here's another one. And if you get on the internet and just put in sports betting, you'll be inundated, and then you could start getting some comments and stuff like that. But these are 2. There are plenty others. And I wanted to find, because they do have new to online wagering, for example. You see it right there? They will give you everything you need to know to how to wager, what it means when they say what a line is, which is -10. But also, if you Google, there's so much information out here, and it's rather easy to get to. So, for example, let's put wagering over-under, which happens to be something that we do a lot of in the sports. You'll get it even in Wikipedia what it is. So you can very quickly bring yourself up to speed, period. Okay?
And what about on currency trading on Forex?
On Forex, there's Forex.com is one of the places that people use. I like to use Interactive Brokers, but Forex.com doesn't have a very high minimum, so you can play with them. What was the other? There was another one that had a very small minimum, but they all have associated with them educational centers. But Forex is just like when we say we're doing the Australian dollar versus the US dollar, or doing Australian futures, those are just labels which are no different than saying you're trading IBM, or even trading an IBM option, or trading the S&P future options. They're all labels which give you price charts. I don't know why this isn't catching. There it is. Here, under Learn. You see here? So you can learn. Now, I have given webinars on these things. I've given so many webinars now, I can't find specific ones anymore. And that's why I just say search on Google, and maybe one of mine will come up. That's sort of a weakness of having too much information. But here, let me give you the Forex one. And maybe I should just, if there are other people that would email me and say, gee, I also would like to have another Forex one, I could always do another one. But I really believe you can get the bulk of the information there, and then always feel free to send me specific questions. When you get to the point, you'll quickly get to the point where you'll get the basic ideas of it. But if you have specific questions, just send me an email and ask. I'm happy to answer them. Now, with respect to you being a new remote viewer, I think you're already in a we group, right? I think that I put you.
I don't know. I just have been responding to emails. We've had that controversy over that. I saw that one page, and I was looking at various groups, and I was trying to decide if there was one of them that I wanted to jump in with, and then that page just disappeared. So all I've relied on now is just when I get an email from someone. I did a viewing with someone, I think it was yesterday or the day before. I guess it was yesterday. And actually, I hit it spot on. I did really good.
And you got a feedback session. Yeah, I think you were in. I think you're in one of my groups. I think it was, you did it yesterday. Do you remember the name? You can look at an email.
It was from Mark Samuelson.
Oh, you did Lively then. Okay. Well, what I'm about
And I
is,
didn't really join. I don't know how you define joining a group, but I got an email and I just responded.
okay. I think what I will do is, if you're open to it, you've heard the word winning entanglements. How about if I put you in one of my winning entanglement groups, and from the perspective of, does the group have a high or low hit rate? Let me assure you that is one of the least important things, because what matters is how you do. The group hit rate is how well the group manager is taking into account how the viewers in his group does. Is he judging in a way that brings them all together? And some group managers with some groups are better at that than others, but what really matters is that you improve your personal precognition. And what you saw in we, if you're open to doing self-judging. Now, if you're not open to doing self-judging, there are groups where there are independent judges. So maybe...
No, I'm open to doing self-judging.
Okay. So I'll put you in one of my we groups. You will get... I'm first going to look and make sure you're not already in one, but I'll put you in one, and the best way to learn, you've already started, and that is just to do it. So what you did with Mark is a good way to learn. I will be putting you in a group. You will get taskings. Just follow what it says, and guess what? It's not always 100% clear. Email me. That's what everybody does. I'm an email guy. Email me, and I'll respond, and after you do one or two of these, you'll be a pro.
All right.
Yeah, but what I mean by that is you'll understand the protocol. And once you understand the protocol, then you can get down to the fun part, which is improving your precognition and getting into it and experiencing it.
That sounds great. I appreciate your time. If you happen to run across one of your Forex webinars, email it to me. I like having people just spell it out to me like a dummy.
You mean the wagering part?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to find the webinar where I discussed this. So I'll try to find that for you.
Teresa.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to find that for you. I know you're interested in that. Let's move on. Now, are any other questions and comments on what we've done so far? Others? And if you have more, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I would just say, in response to that question about where to find some of these past webinars, you may have a few of them that would be easier to find if you did a search on ARV because some of them are posted there, and they're pretty clearly labeled on what is in the webinar. So if you did a search on there for like webinar about Forex or webinar about betting or something like that, would probably come up.
Okay. And where you're saying you found? Oh, that's right. You found my YouTube channel or something like that.
Well, no, I was just saying that I had posted links to a lot of those on ARV.
Right, ARV for Fun. So you may not know that site. It's called ARV numeral 4 fun.com, and Teresa puts a lot of the stuff which we do here. In fact, you should probably even put when we put this webinar out there, you can put a link to that. Okay, so this ARV for Fun, I see. You can they do a search there?
Yeah, search block up in the top right.
Yep. So why don't you put in Forex, and you might be able to find it that way. Or now that you're saying that, you might put Forex in. You can do that in the In fact, you can do that. Let's try that right now. Thank you. Let's go to the discussion group. Right. So here's the Google discussion group. I have different groups here, but everybody is in the discussion group. And let's see. There's a search here. Let's put in Forex. There you go. Forex and we group prediction strategy using confidence. So there's a lot of stuff on Forex that we did here. Thank you, Teresa. And you can do the same thing for ARV fund, presumably, and get the information. Yep. Yeah. In fact,
I'm sorry, where are you looking, where are you finding this? Are you just Googling this?
This was actually more specifically our Google group, and you must be getting emails on that. The main Google group is the app discussion group. Okay.
Okay.
Here, let me put that in here. If you click on that, you're a member of that group. Everybody in app is a member of that group. So that's where we do our general discussions. That's where you heard about this webinar and that kind of stuff. So if you go there, they have all of our discussions, and then I did a search on Forex. And so these are conversations where the word Forex was mentioned. And it turned out the first one came up was a webinar, at least a discussion about it. So, by doing a little investigation like that, you can get a lot of information about Forex. And then the other place you could do the same thing was ARV for Fun. Let's talk a little bit about this. I did get an email from Alexis saying that he is still at the hospital and he's sorry he can't join us. So, but this is really all I know, and I don't know if any of you have pursued this independently with him any further, but he's put this out. He wants first for you to sign a complete disclosure agreement. I guess it's called creativecommons.org, which means everything will be made public. So he's very interested and has always been very interested in everything we do being public. And we're actually quite public, but we're not public down to the level of the individual person. Notice when I showed those that plot with the confidence, the hit rate, the 10, 25 day and cumulative, I did not put the person's name. I will often ask people if it's okay with them, and then I'll show their name. That one in particular I just didn't have time to do. I'm sure the person would have said yes in that case, but some people don't like their names used at all, and so we don't do it. But here, as a part of the scholarship, you would have to agree to be completely open. And then here's the application. Now, what is not clear, and then he wants to understand your experience, is what does $1,000 mean? I don't know if he gives it to you up front, and you get to use it, or he puts in wagers, because what he does say is at the end, recipients receive a check at the end of the duration for 100% of anything over $1,000. So this looks like it's a scholarship in the sense that you can win anything over $1,000. I don't know if you get the $1,000 at the front end, and that's why I was hoping he would be here. I find it a little vague. Now, did any of the rest of you read this, or do you know any more than what I just said? I'll take that to mean no. Okay. So he's making some sort of gesture here. We'll just have to wait and find out more about it. And again, as I said, his mother is very ill. So this will come in its appropriate time through the app discussion list. Okay, very good. Anything else that anybody would like to talk about during these anything apps? I always, I like people such as this to tell us beforehand so people know what's going to come, but then there's always room for something else.
Marty, this is Teresa again.
Mm-hmm.
As always, I'd just like to extend the offer to any of the group managers in particular or any of the viewers who've had particularly good sessions to share those on ARV for Fun. Scott, I know you've had some fantastic sessions lately, and I'm sure you have too, man. I'll get some of those and get them posted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might actually have time to do that this week.
Yeah, that'd be great, Scott, because some of the stuff that you're doing with clay and the what do you call it?
Kinetic sand.
Yeah, the kinetic sand is just incredible. In fact, I think that would be worthy of a whole webinar.
That was the last webinar.
Well, that's right. That's true. We did it last one, but I just think that's just so interesting that other people may very well want to start experimenting with it. It's marvelous. But we are getting so many good sessions that sharing them really is a good idea. Do you put those on the Facebook page as well sometimes?
Yes, I do. And in fact, that was one of the reasons I was kind of pushing it, because someone said it looked like the Teresa show or something like that, and that's certainly not my intent. I really, really, really would like to show other people's stuff too, but it's my stuff. So.
Well, you see, one of the issues that she has to face up to is it takes time. The best is if somebody gives her, like you obviously can just use this one here. You ought to take a screenshot of that, and then you could use that directly with just a few words. So I suggest you do that. So there's one that's not one of your transcripts. Turns out Teresa's had a lot of good transcripts recently, so a lot of it has been hers. But you certainly can use this one. And I always encourage my people to do it, but they don't always do it, and then I can send this stuff to Teresa, but she only has so much time, too. Everybody right now in this organization are volunteers. So that's the issue she faces up to. So if you can, send things in as close to a form like this that she can put right up with just a few words. Thank you, Teresa. I mean, I do think that's very helpful. We're all about education. So the more we get out like this showing that precognition is real and ARV can be used and all of that is extraordinarily helpful.
I usually bounce them out on Google and on two of the Facebook sites. So, I do try to get pretty much everything.
Yeah. Okay. You have to talk just a little louder, though. But I think I got that. Anyway, you just keep doing.
I would.
Yeah. Go ahead. Okay.
So you might want to invite everybody to join us in New Orleans. It isn't always obvious from the discussion group, but we're going to be in New Orleans in a few months, and you can meet all of us.
Well, yeah.
You meet Joe McMonagle and maybe even Russell Tark.
No, Russ is not coming,
okay.
But Joe Gallenberger will be there, and he does these energy classes. And he's going to be connecting that with precognition, and we're going to be talking about PK, psychokinesis versus precognition. And Ed May will be there, and he's going to be giving a talk on his precognition, what he calls multiphasic precognition scientific model in plain English. I had him add that to his title, so the title of his talk includes in plain English. And he's actually very good at that, so he'll be there. So yes, any of you who really want to and can, yeah, please join us in New Orleans. We'll also be doing 6 precognitive predictions with feedback during the workshop. So we have these great speakers. Dean Radin is speaking. He's giving a webinar talk, which of course everybody at the workshop will be able to see as well. And his is on precognition and health. The overall theme is precognition in your life, and health and wealth are the 2 kind of focuses. Those are both rather important. And so we'll be actually focusing on health and wealth as it connects to precognition and doing 6 4X predictions where people will be able to actually wager based on our predictions done at the workshop with feedback.
And in the past, our accuracy for those predictions have been really good. There used to be sports predictions, but we would be 4 out of 4, or 5 out of 6, or 6 out of 6 over the years.
Yeah. The idea of being together live and building on each other's enthusiasm really does work. So.
And just having Joe McMonagle sitting in the room somehow seems to help.
And he submits transcripts now, which we're just
gorgeous one.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Yeah.
One. Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, do join us if you can. And certainly we'd prefer to have you there in New Orleans, but you could just do webinar only. And you can get the link to that just by going to appliedprecog.com. Okay, very good. We always tend to have these be about 2 hours, and it looks like we're doing that again. Any last questions, comments? Okay, then let me end it here and just say to all of you, keep precogging.
Thank you so much. It was very inspiring.
Thanks, Marty.
Good. Thank you for coming. You know, we really all enjoy being together. And I will end this now, and we'll all stay in touch.
Bye-bye.
Bye.